Machine Head of Kingdom and Crown. Finally, this day has arrived because it feels like it's been a long time since we had Catharsis, the last Machine Head album, and yet they have been ever present in that time, perhaps to their detriment, because the last 4.5 years since Catharsis, in a myriad of different ways, have been difficult ones to endure, both for Machine Head and as Machine Head fans, to put it lightly.
I said in my notes, it has been a bumpy few years for Machine Head.
Yeah, I mean, you don't have to be a genius to point that out, do you? Like, you know, it's...
Like, I mean, it even goes beyond Catharsis. It's like,
yeah,
you could look at the 2010s as a bumpy, divisive decade for them.
Maybe, yeah. I think we'll touch on that in a minute. But, you know, obviously, last time out, and I'm not even talking entirely just critically about the album here, but the campaign surrounding it, and the place that, you know, Machine Head took up in the pecking order of the world was rough. Obviously, then, most of the band left. Some of them, you know, going in the press and decrying the record that they just made, which does mean that, you know, Machine Head, since Phil Demmel and Dave McClain left, even though, you know, Jared is there and has become a really strong, solid, kind of recognisable face, is it fair to say that Machine Head is, in the last few years, has felt the most like Rob Flynn? You know, like you are looking at him to essentially be Machine Head.
Yeah, no, it has felt like that, especially like when you took a lot of the singles and stuff like that, and the kind of like the interviews he'd do and the sort of like videos he'd put out talking. It felt like this was kind of like Rob Flynn against the world at points.
Yes, and the last, you know, again, 4 years were the kind of the real, you know, shit spilling over, hitting the fan thing. But as you say, maybe it's sort of something that had been building up for a while, because the run of Machine Head albums that we've been on is sort of interesting in, I think you get different reactions from different people a lot of the time. And it's, basically you get The Blackening is the last, like, real touchstone of everyone being absolutely on the same page glory that Machine Head have, whether that is deserved or not. Myself, Locust, I still cringe a bit and recoil a bit when people use it as an example of, like, a horribly disappointing record.
I think Locust is brilliant. It's the album that made me really like Machine Head, because I kind of got into them on The Blackening, and then that was one that solidified it.
I am the same, and maybe that's why I have a point for it. But I love it. I always have. I think
there is one thing on Locust I would remove.
Well, it is
the children's choir.
But let me fucking get to this, because Locust, multiple classic live staple songs that seem to be ignored by people when they go, oh, Locust, wasn't it shit? Because there is about 30 seconds of kids' choir on the whole record, on an otherwise killer song. Like, Who We Are is an amazing song.
Anthem.
But has one moment on an album ever been blown up to represent more of a record that it's, like, actually barely on? Like,
no, you are spot on. It is
11 years on now. People go, "Oh, Locust, shit, kids choir." 30 seconds. Like, sit down.
That is kind of how bad the kids choir is. But also at the same time, people do like just blow out so much, because that album, like, title track is awesome. Darkness Within is one of the best Machine Head ballads. I Am Hell as an opener. Like, if it's like Pause Before the Swine and Be Still and Know. Like, I think that album is. Like,
This Is the End was great when they were doing it.
Well, that's it. Is every song on it. It's 7 songs that are great. Like, and then there is 30 seconds of kids choir that is rubbish.
But there's the other thing. It's the one moment in this whole time that Machine Head have been concise as well.
Yeah.
7 songs and about 45 minutes. What would you guys give for that now at any point since then? Stop fucking whining about a tiny little bit of kids choir acting like it ruins a fantastic album.
That goes on to exactly what my problem with the last 2 Machine Head records are.
Well, yeah, on that note, Bloodstone and Diamonds, again, just going through the records, I think is awesome, but it does have a little editing problem that begins to creep in. Catharsis is where the toys were absolutely thrown out of the pram. For me, the main actual flaw is not necessarily the musical flights of fancy on it, but more just that the editing problem continued and worsened. Yeah. Like, 75 minutes and 15 songs is too much for what was there. And there were some moments of pretty awful lyrics here and there on it as well. But in terms of people blowing up something to be larger and more representative than what it was with Machine Head, I think it's kind of the kids' choir all over again a little bit, because I've always felt that some, not all, but some of the experiments on it are pretty great, and here's the thing, a lot of it is just a really direct, satisfying Machine Head record. Like, it's still actually closer to Bloodstone and Diamonds than it is Supercharger in genetic makeup if you ignore Triple Beam. Like, I revisited the review I wrote for a magazine at the time, and I pretty much stand by it.
No, I mean, I think Catharsis has got plenty of stuff I like on it. It is too long. I mean, I even think, aside from that one lyric, I like Bastards.
Well, yeah. Here's the thing, I think it wasn't phoned in either. Like, it's not a band doing by numbers, we are 30 years into a career, we've got roots in the Bay Area thrash scene, let's just do another one of those. Catharsis, to me, feels passionate. And it feels like it cares about what it's putting out there and, you know, keeping it interesting and rewarding for them. And you can think that, you know, maybe some of the experiments were disasters. That's fine. I still think it's weird to act like all 75 minutes of it are, you know,
bad. Yeah.
Like what happens when you live life on a triple beam, because it isn't. You are lying to yourself.
I mean, I think Triple Beam's fun.
I like Triple Beam as well. But again, I'm just saying, even if you ignore the bits that people hated from it, most of it's just like Machine Head. What's your problem?
Well, I think Catharsis, what you were talking about, like Rob versus the world, like that. I think that passion in like the Catharsis felt like an album that Rob wanted to do these things and take these creative leaps, and that's probably where some of the divisions arose. Like,
yeah, but whether you liked the record or not, the wheels fell off as soon as it came out, essentially. And for me, some of the more worrying signs were the singles that we got in the immediate aftermath of Catharsis that felt like Machine Head trying on some different suits.
They felt directionless, is how I kind of felt.
And not really fitting them. Although, again, some of them I like. The one with Jesse Leach
is wicked.
I think it's fantastic. And the backlash around them, again, overkill. But basically, what I'm saying is for the last decade plus of Machine Head, we have precedent for people massively exaggerating what things are with them. But this brings us to Kingdom and Crown, which has a clear level of importance and expectation hanging over it than any of their records since Unto the Locust, when it was following up The Blackening, and for completely the opposite reason. And I think the idea here is that Machine Head have stalled before, right? And they have come back storming before. They are, in their own little way, they are the comeback kings. So I think there is a belief in that. For as much as people have thrown shit at Machine Head in the last few years, there's a belief that that can happen again.
They're a band who have had like peaks and valleys, absolutely.
Yes.
Right.
So, of Kingdom and Crown, do you feel like this record is angry?
I mean,
obviously it's heavy, it's aggressive, it's Machine Head, but is it a particularly angry, maybe as a result of their last few years? Listen,
I think so. Like, I think even on the like some of the slower and more anthemic stuff, there is a like bite and anger to it. And I mean, like when this album goes, like which we'll get onto, they sound more fiery and more like intense than I think they have done in a good while. Like, I think there is a real like Rob is 100% in this. He is like pouring out every feeling. Like,
yeah, and I think one of the questions with this album would be because again, like, you know, you're not idiots. You know already that this is a heavier, more vicious thrash-leaning record without the flights of fancy that Catharsis had. You know, than Catharsis was. You know that already. You want to know if it's good or not. And I think one of the questions with that would be: is this kind of just bowing to expectation and, you know, running back with its tail between its legs, giving in to what people want from Machine Head, or is it firing that out of, you know, real conviction?
No, I think this album is real. I don't think this is them like bowing down to pressure. I mean, just take Slaughter the Martyr as an opener. Like, that to me sets the tone for this record, where it's 3 minutes before the song really takes off, and it is Rob in like a more vulnerable state than he has been. Like,
yeah, well, for me, some of those singles, like, you know, the first one I think we got was Do or Die, and that was like, you know, aggressive thrash, but I didn't quite feel it so much. I think it's also worth saying that this is the first concept album that Machine Head have ever done. I think it's fair to say that's a maybe a useful framework for Rob, like charging him up and kind of, you know, giving him direction at this point in time, more than it is for us. I think, you know, as a concept album, the interludes, they're not very good. They're just distracting. Like, especially like the last one, literally adds nothing. But like, it's not an essential concept driven listen.
No, I mean, I just like none of that really made any impact for me. I could like, if I'd not known beforehand it's a concept record, I wouldn't have guessed it was on a listen. Like,
yeah, I mean, like, apart from the interludes, and then there's been a kind of protracted release of singles from it, which especially, you know, the concept feels weird when we have that EP and it's like tracks 3, 11, and 13 from it. Like, okay. I am very happy that we are back at the stage of having a new Machine Head album. Like, it feels like closing the book a bit on the weird chapter of having like a sort of undercooked new single kind of every other month. And this format for them, just letting everything fly, is a lot more natural for them. They did themselves kind of quite early throw out the Blackening comparison in terms of what this record is going for. And as a result, you know, that very quickly became the narrative in the kind of, you know, the week leading up to this and so on. And when, you know, Slaughter the Martyr, obviously when Machine Head do a thrashy record with a 10-minute opener, that naturally leads people to obviously comparing it to One Thing. It's cool though. I like the clean intro before it kicks off properly. It's got a very melancholic, doomed kind of tone to it. Just those like lone guitar notes plucking out and reverberating. And then I think the vocal harmonies on it are one of the things where you can kind of, I guess, see progress from where, you know, they are much pronounced and stronger than they were 10 years ago because of who is in the band.
Yeah. No, I think it's a great opener. I like, again, I think that Blackening comparison is kind of one of the things that I've seen a lot of, and I'm like, can we avoid doing that? But people can't.
People
so whatever.
shoot themselves in the foot when they start doing that to themselves or to other bands.
To me, I was like, hey, this is a just really like rousing 10-minute opener. Like I said, I really like those first 3 minutes where, like you said, it is really melancholic. And then when you just get that shout of Slaughter the Martyr and the riff hits, then I'm like, and then it's just go. And this one again, where Robbie's screaming this, he sounds really like fired up and angry. And the I Lay Paralyzed and Homicidal Rage hook where they're harmonizing, I mean, that is really big. And it feels again like it is like they're making use of this being an epic 10-minute opener as like a statement of the record, and not just trying to kind of just do Clenching the Fists again, basically, or like I Am Hell, which again is another kind of drawn out extended opener. But I think this is a worthy of like the sort of like the stature of the grand Machine Head opener.
Yeah, it's not one of my favourite songs on the record, weirdly enough. The shift into the riff, I think, is a bit more of like an obvious shift than like a build and explosion. Like, it's part A and then part B begins, as opposed to like a crescendo into that. So I think the energy is a little bit more stilted, but and then when it does explode, it's a bit more maybe steady mid-tempoed than I kind of expected. But Machine Head can write a 10-minute metal song, you know what I mean? And melodically it is very strong, and it does feel like it's again, while I kind of sort of disparage the concept a little bit, it does feel like it's kind of setting up a larger record to unfold after it in a kind of a 10-minute runtime, which leads us to everything that follows it, which it is kind of delivering the things that Machine Head fans want. And I don't mean that, again, cynically. I don't mean just bowing to that. I think in terms of how I think this one will be received, it is Machine Head plugging back into the core idea of what excites 90% of their fan base about listening to Machine Head. And so in that sense, it's a victory.
Yeah, no, I agree. I think like when this album, like I say, when it goes into like the thrashier side of things, like the pace is there, the riffs are like hard hitting, it's got big kind of shout along things that you know that when played live, the circle pits are going to be a whirling around. But it, like I said, I don't think it feels phoned in and trying to just like appease the fans. The conviction feels there. I mean, I feel like the one to have Choke on the Ashes on Your Head and Become the Firestorm is like, you want thrash Machine Head. Like, these two songs deliver that in spades.
Yeah, I hadn't quite realised it so heavily, really, but Rob Flynn, in the kind of lead up to this, he said something about every record that they've done since The Blackening has been really heavy on, like, extra stuff in terms of, like, orchestration or, you know, kind of other studio elements.
There's been like a grander feel to them.
Yeah. And this one, even though it has, like, you know, again, a 10-minute opener and stuff like that, it's their most purely guitar-based record in fucking ages in terms of it doesn't have all these, you know, just grand cinematic touches. It is just, like, very kind of simple setup, I guess, in terms of just like, guitars, drums, let's fucking go. Which, in terms of its basicness, in terms of setup, I think it furthers that part of Catharsis, weirdly, because most of what Catharsis did wasn't rap metal, it wasn't folk punk or whatever. Most of Catharsis
was big riffing Machine Head.
Yeah, but it was doing like the Machine Head groove metal, thrash metal thing, but after the previous bunch of albums, it condensed it down into like 4-minute direct, no fanfare bangers. Like, Locust is 7 songs, but the reason it can be 7 songs is because they're all 8 minutes long. Catharsis, it was 15, but had quite more punchy approach to it. And then it did about 20 of them, which was too much. But like, that simplicity of Catharsis, I think, it keeps that, but and that then continued into the post lineup change singles that we got as well. But it's cut the experimentation of Catharsis while making the imagery and subject matter more kind of fanciful metal grand metaphor again, as opposed to again the directness in that sense of Catharsis that people really took umbrage with. It's under an hour, but only just.
I still think this feels a touch too long.
Well, I think there's less variation, I think, than either Catharsis or Bloodstone and Diamonds as well, to recall an album that hasn't got a bunch of stuff on it that people can't stand. Like, that record, it is a bit overlong, but it has a real smorgasbord of different stuff. This is the most focused in one direction a Machine Head album has been in a long time, which will be, I guess, maybe either a positive or a negative, dependent on your sensibility, I think.
Yeah, I think that's fair. I think because I guess it kind of does two things. It's either do you want the fast thrashy song or the kind of more mid tempo moving
sad song? Yeah,
yeah. I think there are really good examples of both those songs on this record. I think the sort of the slower sad songs is maybe one or two of them you kind of go. I think like My Hands Are Empty is one that lands a little flat for me. Those woes feel really kind of washed out and don't hit.
I think we kind of spoke about some of that when we were on the EP. And just on the subject of the EP, those songs are hitting more for me in the record. I think we got Choke on the Ashes of Your Hate as one of those. And here, especially when it comes in after, again, 10-minute opener, it's like almost disarmingly brutal. Like, it's so fucking raging. And the urgency and the speed of that riff as well. It reminds me of Exodus. I've been thinking about them lately, seeing them live. But that Gary Holt manic energy in a thrash riff just going all over the fretboard in service of, whipping up a pit. This song has that, the most that the Machine have had in fucking ages. And the hook of just roaring, choke on the ashes of your head. It's kind of unsophisticated, but just in a way that's boiling over primal rage, nothing else.
Yeah, no, I mean, there's a sort of song later on that does that real just caveman knuckle dragging thing really well. That I think that's something I do really like on this album, is that when it just wants to go full on just primal rage, it does sound hard and fired up and angry, in a way that feels really that does feel full of conviction and not it's just posturing, I guess. So,
I mean, at the very least, it's probably the heaviest record they've made since The Blackening. I like the breakdowny bits where they dabble in just a little bit of death metal, whether that is Vogue's influence or whatever. Vogue does some.
It's the beat down in Rotten is the one where I mean, Feeling even kind of doing almost a guttural kind of growl on it at points.
Yeah, Vogue does some great solos on it as well. Very talented lead guitarist. But Become the Firestorm, particularly since seeing that one live a couple of weeks ago, it's both really furious and really catchy.
That chorus has been stuck in my head for weeks.
It's the standout hook on the record for sure. That high end tremolo riff that opens on the blast beat and then become the it's. And I love that it's still full on thrash pace on that chorus. It's still just going. It is thrilling. And then that last chorus going halftime and just riding the double bass. That moment is fucking epic. Just a wildfire raging over a landscape. Even the key change, that is huge. And then, as you say, at the back of the record, there's a couple of really welcome direct rages as well, with Bloodshot, which is super Max Cavalera. And then Rotten, which weirdly again stands out more here as part of this last punch of brutality than it kind of did as a single. Both of those have got those really gutturally kind of death metal breakdowns that we're saying as well.
Yeah. And I think they come really nice at the end after kind of the middle section, which like we'll get into, but this is where I feel the record is a tiny bit flabby. Like,
Sure. Jared becoming, Rob's de facto right-hand man since the rest of the band left. You really felt that in the last couple of years in terms of like how suddenly noticeable he is. And
yeah.
vocally, carrying that Become the Firestorm chorus, like it's really cool to have those two voices like firing off against each other. Mainly becomes a focus when it is leaning on the kind of softer material. My Hands Are Empty, I think we spoke about it maybe feeling a little bit anemic when the chorus hits rather than rousing. I think it mostly does work in being kind of a more downtrodden feeling song. I'm not into really the kind of like, whoa, that kind of whole, I think that sound has just been ruined in the last 10 years.
I do agree on that.
And then it comes back for No Gods, No Masters, where like one of those songs with that big whoa is definitely enough.
I think No Gods No Masters is slightly better at it, but because it comes second in the record, like then maybe you just feel like exasperated with it by the time that rolls around.
Yeah, there's also Unhallowed, which is a little bit like that. But Unhallowed I really like for the central riff that it rings to me as being a lot like their tour mates Amon Amarth. Like there's a kind of melodicism in it while being like just like stomping and fist pumping that's a bit like Machine Head doing like an archetypal Amon Amarth riff. And then particularly the bridge of that song is like becomes fantastic. Like past the kind of like 4.5 minute mark, there's this wonderful maiden melody and a huge group swell in the vocal. Like I wish that was a chorus because it's only used once, but it's lovely.
Yeah, no, and that one again has like a big sort of key change at the end. I think Unhallowed is the best example of the kind of like slower. So because you're right, that big kind of stomping riff is a nice sort of hook to ground the song in. Flynn again sounding more vulnerable, like that feels believable in him, and it does build really nice and swells up at the end.
Yeah, I think that bridge moment has made my favourite moment one of those songs. I think as an overall song, I think the best song in that guy is on the record is kind of in a good slot on the record because Arrows in Words from the Sky is a very good closer, I think, to end on something more wistful.
Yes.
Like the guitar parts in that song are beautiful. And actually, it remind me of My Dying Bride a little bit in just terms of like, kind of the kind of sorrow of it. So that works for me as well.
Yeah, no, I agree with that. It feels quite like rousing, like even in its sadness as like a closer, kind of like rallying together to defy.
Which
the odds, like.
That kind of brings me to, I think the thing most in common with The Blackening emotionally, I think, are some of those moments from Rob that just tap into a really pure heavy metal kind of empowerment and resistance idea. Like, when you think of, our time is now, and just like how gargantuan that makes you feel as a person. Here, that if ever there was time of my life, that time is now. Like, Rob just pulling that line out of the guts of himself, fully embodying the intent and the rage in that moment. You become the Firestorm. It is like classic heavy metal empowerment fantasy stuff that worked a treat so much.
Yeah, I think this is one thing that like where Rob, I do really think he is really good.
I mean, that's just one of the best things about Machine Head in general, isn't it?
Yeah, no, totally. He's always had that ability, and I think here it maybe feels like something that like wasn't there as much on something like Catharsis, and here it's kind of back in there, really grabbing your attention. That is one of the strongest aspects.
Well, I think for me, there's the anger that is seething in Kill Thy Enemies. Is just brutish, and I think that that has. I know it's within the kind of frame, the framework of this concept, but kind of like there's a little bit of that kind of like social rage from Rob that I think is very galvanizing when he gets it right, which he did on some parts of Catharsis.
I know. I like again, like I mean, that song is like you can dress up how you want. It's basically saying kill Nazis, like.
Obviously there's the issue of kind of it's a little bit of a disparate band at the moment in that the drum tracks on this were laid down by a session player who's a guy who played in with Animals as Leaders, but the actual like the full-time Machine Head drummer who I saw them play live with a couple of weeks ago, not on this record. I'm not sure if that was just a COVID thing. It's a little bit kind of bit fragmented still as players. Like I would like maybe some more just kind of like real, let's get a unit going and just get that unit in a room and fully work out all of the chemistry and everything, which is what helped make, the Demel and McLean era lineup so special.
Yeah.
There are a couple bits when kind of momentum in a track, like I said earlier, kind of stalls through shifting sections. It's really good though.
Like I say, this feels like a sort of steadying of the ship, getting things back on track. And I do think at its best, this is brilliant. I think, like I say, I think some people have kind of been rushing to kind of like, again, with the blackening comparisons, maybe a bit much, but I don't like, if people want to be excited about Machine Head album after a rocky few years, I don't want to kind of like get in the way of that. Like, I think it's nice to sort of see people rallying behind this band again. Like, that's something I can get down with. But yeah, I do think this is a very good record.
Yeah, I think I'm just resistant to hyperbole on this one, partially because I reject the overall narrative. Like,
I mean, that's partly why I'm the same. Like.
Well, half of Catharsis is closer to this record than you think. So I just can't buy into this being like some dramatic fucking reversal of fortunes. Like, they've made a very good Machine Head album that is more focused in one direction, following up one that at its core was a very good Machine Head album, just embellished with all this other stuff that people didn't jive with. So, you know, if you need a epic long form hit of that Machine Head metal and nothing else, I am genuinely happy that you have a record that you love now from a band who had disappointed you. But I can't buy into, you know, the discourse swinging from Machine Head are dreadful now to OMG, they've made the blackening too.
I think it's just, it was like I said, I do think everything that surrounded Catharsis did colour the narrative, like, and it's gonna, like, the lineup splitting, the kind of like, is this the end of Machine Head? Like, that's always gonna be one of those things that's gonna, at the time, cause a kind of set the discourse in a certain direction. And I guess for people that they find it easier to come back around to this one, and like, again, like, I do think this is a substantial improvement on Catharsis on the whole. I don't think Catharsis was a disaster. I think it's a pretty good Machine Head record.
I think that this record is Machine Head doing what they do well. It feels convincingly fired up and angry. There is a bit of filler. If we look at it again, where they've been maybe since their last like all-out classic, universally recognised moment, I think Locust is a lot better.
I would still take Locust over this. Yeah.
I think Bloodstone is better. Catharsis, this is definitely more consistent because it's less freewheeling. I think Catharsis had higher highs. Like, you come to the show for hot takes, Bastards is a better song than anything on this album, and you can fucking put that in your pipe and smoke it.
Like I say, I will defend Bastards again, bar that one lyric. We just have to like, and again, the intention behind that lyric, I agree with. I just think the execution of it is clunky as hell. But I don't know if I could say that because I really like "Choke on the Ashes of Your Hate."
Sure, I mean,
Firestorm. Like,
I'm saying it. Bastards, better song than anything on this album. I don't care if it hasn't got a fucking thrash riff or whatever.
Spicy.
But this is a step back into doing well what people clearly accept them doing. So I'm just happy it means people stop treating them like a punchline. Like,
yeah, no. I'm down for that.
Like, there were a rough few years of over egging the hatred, and this feels like a Machine Head that at least we can all be down with.
I think like even in those singles, there's only one of those singles that I ever have any like thing that was like, no, that was terrible. But like generally, I do like think, yeah, people have kind of like ragged on Machine Head enough, and their time has passed now. It's cool to like them again.
Yeah, and going out on an arena tour of the Monomarth as well, with a record like this in hand, having something that people are enthused about, man, that's going to be good. Like, we're actually reviewing all of the bands on that bill in this episode, so we'll probably talk about it a couple of times, but fuck yeah. Machine Head of Kingdom and Crown.